Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jacqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining us on the set of Doors to Hope and Healing. You've been here with us one other time a couple of years back, so it's wonderful to have you back on the set.
Great to be here.
Thank you for coming. So today we're going to be talking about a very sensitive topic, human trafficking. We just came off of Human Trafficking Month, but unfortunately, like we talked about earlier, it's a problem that affects children, people throughout the calendar year. But before we start to talk about that topic, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Tammy Sneed. I actually am the director of the Office of Human Trafficking Services for DCF, and I oversee Connecticut's Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team, and we call that HART, H-A-R-T. In my role, I get to work with partners across the state, very focused on eradicating child trafficking in our state, and I also get to work with our partners that are working with these kids on a daily basis.
And I believe you were a foster parent?
I was a foster parent and ended up adopting 2 kids through DCF. So very lucky to have both of them. They're now well into their adulthood.
Well, you kind of work in, you live and breathe the work.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. And we need people like you. So I know that human trafficking is a topic that many people may have heard or have an understanding of just at baseline. Right. But I know that there's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. Can you talk to us just about the differentiation between the different types of trafficking?
Sure. So sex trafficking is where there's some sort of sex act for something of value. There's that exchange. And when we're looking at children under the age of 18, we don't have to prove any force, fraud, or coercion. So if there's any adult purchasing sex from a child, that child is a victim, and that adult can be charged. Now, on labor trafficking, you're looking at for some sort of labor act for minimal or no money. So we see this a lot with our individuals that are undocumented, and we see a lot with vulnerable individuals in the community that need to make money, and then they're lured into labor trafficking.
And explain a situation that would be labor trafficking.
Sure. We had a situation where we had a 12-year-old boy that came to the U.S. and actually came to Connecticut. He was working in a restaurant 12 hours a day. Initially, he was going to school. The school noticed he was starting to fall asleep. Then he started missing a lot of classes, and eventually he stopped going to school. And at the height of it, he was working anywhere from 12 to 18 hours and often sleeping at that restaurant. So, and he was there to pay down some debt from a family member that got him to the U.S. for a safe place to live and some opportunities here in the United States, but all those opportunities were taken from him.
And was it a family business that he was working for?
It was, unfortunately. And it's not uncommon. We see it with farming in Connecticut. We see it with lodging. Sometimes you'll have individuals that are working under some sort of contract, and that hotel may think that the people that are working for them are working legitimately, right? That they're getting paid, right? Regular salaries, that they're keeping their tips. And unfortunately, many times they're not.
Well, I think our show today will help our viewers understand the signs and what to look for so that they can be vocal about what their concerns may be and that things aren't always as they would appear. So you talked about this boy coming to Connecticut, but is this a national crisis?
It absolutely is. And since COVID, I will tell you, since COVID, we have seen the numbers skyrocket, in particular to sex trafficking. What happened with COVID, and we all know this, right? Kids had to still be educated. So kids that never had technology now have it. Kids that never had the internet now have it. And there's data that tells us there was a 98% increase on on traffickers online trying to lure kids in during COVID. And they were successful because we saw our cases climb quite dramatically.
Wow, they took advantage of that opportunity to have the children behind the screen much more than they would be. And they were there behind that screen for many years. I mean, 2 years on and off, intermittently, they were there. How does Connecticut compare to the national standards?
You know, Connecticut, we've been doing this work for a lot of years, and we have a really good system where in Connecticut, any suspected child victim of trafficking, whether we're talking sex trafficking or labor trafficking, gets called into our DCF care line. And those reports go to HART, and every single one of those cases get attended to, whether they're accepted by the department or they're not, because the alleged perpetrator may not be the parent, guardian, or entrusted caregiver. So every case goes in. We document every single case. Every case gets the full attention from our multidisciplinary teams in the state, which assures kids services, assures family services, and then law enforcement receives all of these reports so they can follow up on the law enforcement side. So we have a really good system in place that doesn't force families into the department to get services for kids, but no matter what, kids are getting what they need, and families are getting what they need.
And for our viewers watching, and I'll repeat this throughout our segment today, if someone should suspect that a child's being trafficked, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, they should call our hotline number, which is on the screen. And that's the best way to report.
Absolutely. Call DCF Care Line. Say that you think this child may be a victim of human trafficking. Give them all the information you have. We always tell people to give them some of the red flags, which we can talk about. Give them that information. And again, it will get to HART. No matter if the case is accepted or not, we're going to attend to it and make sure the cases get to the right place.
That's good to know. So talk about those red flags. What are some of the red flags that we can be looking for when we're looking out for the best interest of children?
Sure, absolutely. So when we're thinking about sex trafficking red flags, kids that run away are the most at risk. We know that traffickers, 1 out of every 3 kids that run away from home on average are approached by a trafficker within 48 hours. And in 2021, I think 1 out of 6 of those kids, according to Nutmeg, were actually pulled into the life. So the numbers are quite astounding. And if you think about it too, right, it's, you know, kids, adolescents, right, they get frustrated with their parents. They may just, you know, take off for a few hours, but those few hours can be really dangerous for them. So that is a big red flag. Seeing behavioral changes, right? Whether it's more inward behaviors or more external behaviors. Seeing kids that are losing a lot of weight, that don't look healthy, that don't look cared for. Kids that, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. You know, you draw a blank when you have a list is in front of you. Kids that have things of value, right? So if you're working with a kid, you know, say you're a school teacher, and all of a sudden you're seeing a kid have clothing or shoes that are super expensive, and you know that family doesn't have the means. It's a red flag. None of this absolutely means a kid's a victim, but you start to see some of those things. You start to see kids with multiple cell phones. That can be a red flag. So there's a number of them, but you start to see some significant changes in a child, you know, any child under the age of 18, and it's compounded. Kids that all of a sudden have new tattoos. And they're not willing to tell you about it, right? Kids like to talk about their tattoos, right? They have meaning for them. But when they're a little nervous, right? You're talking to a kid and they're a little nervous about it, I'd be concerned, right? Whether it's trafficking or something else. So just things that are out of the ordinary could mean other things, but distinctly we start to see kids not look well, have things that they typically don't have. There's maybe an adult in their life that's kind of controlling, that's kind of managing what they're doing, you know, a new kind of older boyfriend, older girlfriend, a big sister kind of scenario, big brother kind of scenario, but that individual's, you know, really controlling and calling all the shots.
So if something just doesn't sit right with you when you're working with a child, it's best to report it and let the professionals make those assessments.
Right, absolutely. And we need to talk to kids, right? And we need to educate them. right? So the challenge here is a lot, when we've interviewed our kids that have been victims, they've told us very clearly they wish they learned what this was before it happened to them. So we have to have those conversations. We have to educate kids so they can see some of those warning signs before they're actually lured in. So that's the other real important piece.
Yeah, education. Yeah, absolutely. So talk about how the internet, how social media plays into sex trafficking.
Right. So, it's interesting because right now social media can, and the internet can cover every aspect of trafficking. When you look at what the traffickers are doing, they're luring kids online. They're becoming the boyfriend. They're becoming the girlfriend. They're the modeling agency. They're the production company that's going to make them a big time rapper, right? Some false sense of relationship. Then they start to sell these kids online, right? They're posting these kids online. They're tracking kids online. They're putting on their phones tracking devices so they know where these kids are. The money is transferred online. So, it's a high profit criminal enterprise, and it's so low risk for the trafficker because of the dynamics to the internet. So our kids, the biggest challenge is, right, they think they're protected on the opposite side of that screen. And I tell parents, even if your house is in the middle of the woods and you only allow your kid to use their laptop in the living room or the kitchen, we think everything is safe and sound. And we've seen cases where kids have been lured in with the parent cooking dinner, 10 feet away from them, right? The technology offers a whole new access point to our kids. And until kids really realize how risky that is, we'll see trafficking, and we'll also see some other really bad things happening.
So when you talk about all those different dimensions, from, the modeling agency, production company, or, just someone attracted to them and want to be a boyfriend or girlfriend or take it. And then you talked about tagging their whereabouts or selling them.
Right.
What's the first thing that a trafficker would do? If you can just kind of paint that scenario for us. So, a child's online and is there a social media app that you feel it's happening on more so than others?
So they're going to start to groom that kid, and they do their homework. Right? They're watching this kid, they're watching conversations this kid is having, and then they start to be something that fills the gaps that kid has identified. So maybe that kid's online talking about how frustrated they are with their mom, or that school's too difficult, I can't do this, my parents don't get it. They're finding ways to have conversation. We had one scenario where a trafficker was engaging a girl online. And at one point he said, I graduated from your school, like 4 or 5 years ago. Does so-and-so still work there? Well, he got online, and at that particular school, they had pictures of all the teachers. He picked out the oldest teacher he thought was there. And of course, she was like, yes, so-and-so is still there. All of a sudden, right, those walls come down, right? He graduated from my school. He's a little older, which is kind of cool for teenagers, right? So that wall started to come down. Then he'll talk to him. Yeah, I know. It was so good for me when I finally got out of my house. I know what you're dealing with. So they're very, very deliberate and very, very skillful in what they're doing. And they do it online. I mean, right in their own homes, right in schools. Sometimes these kids are lured in through schools, right? They're on the internet at school and they're being recruited in.
It's so frightening. Yeah, so frightening.
It really is.
And what is Stockholm Syndrome?
Sure. Stockholm Syndrome is where these kids become bonded with that individual. I like to tell people, think about domestic violence, right? We have that bond, right? And it's really hard to leave that bond. And they fill that gap. I remember, and this has been quite a few years, but a kid told me once that her trafficker was the first person that bought her cough medicine and soup when she was sick. Right. So think about that, right? How powerful. And she clearly remembered it. That was a powerful moment for her. So sad that you have a kid, right, that never had those kind of experiences. Sad that trafficker took that to advantage and was able to pull that kid and become the boyfriend, that she's always wanted, that kind of filled in that life.
Because they find that vulnerability that child had.
Absolutely. On our website, the easiest way to get to the heart page is do a search for DCF Heart. HART, no.
And remind us what it stands for again.
Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team.
Okay.
Go in there. We have some great internet safety resources, things you can do as parents, courses you can take with your kid. There's even a contract where when your kid, you finally say, okay, you can have a cell phone. All right. You've been doing good. It's time, right? Even though parents are really anxious, there's a contract that talks about some of the things you need to put in place and say, hey, it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I don't trust others. So really just diving into this internet safety, diving into conversations with kids, at that dinner table, in the living room instead of that laptop, and equipping them to have that information that they need to keep themselves safe.
So I think what's important for our viewers to hear, and I know myself even as a parent of a teenager, that although our foster kids or children that may be in vulnerable situations are often taken advantage of, but this can really happen to any child, who's somewhat naive or is enjoying that attention or has just a trusting personality. I think it's so important for our viewers to understand just how real this is.
I cannot tell you how many cases we have had where the only vulnerability was the fact that the victim was a teenager, right? That was a child, right? That makes you vulnerable, right? We know that kids are very vulnerable, but none of those other risk factors. And it happens all the time. So it is really important when we look at our data. 2022 is not final yet, but we're going to have close to 300 referrals last year. Well over 60%, probably close to 70+% of these kids were living at home at time of victimization.
Wow.
So again, it's not the kids in the foster homes and the congregate care settings. Yes, those kids are vulnerable. Yes, they are often targeted by traffickers, but they're not the only ones. It's any child.
So I know on your website you have so many valuable tools and resources that everyone can access and learn from. Right. Do you find that there is a social media platform that is the most frightening? Like, for example, Snapchat. I know that it goes away. The kids are, having these long conversations and then they vanish.
So on the website, you'll see what we call is a app guide. We have one in English and one in Spanish. You'll see some of the major apps. I will tell you there are so many, and they go up and down all the time. When we look at them, we're looking at TikTok, we're looking at Snapchat, Omegle is a site that really, really scary. Dating websites, they are huge in luring kids in and trafficking victims, both adults and kids. So it's really, any site can be used to recruit and lure kids in. And the one thing I missed saying was also video games. Kids, video games are social now, right?
Yes,
it's not like in our days with Pac-Man, right?
I know.
It is all about socializing. When I train parents, I say, I know the headphones are a blessing, right, for the noise, but these kids are meeting really bad actors on those games. We had a bunch of kids lured in through Fortnite and some of the most popular games, and it's not the fault of the game. It's the people they're meeting while they're playing, and then they go into other social media sites to continue that relationship building. And often it's a bad actor. So it's really any type of technology where people have access to our kids in our own homes, where they can develop those relationships. Those relationships are some sort of fraudulent relationship, and kids are just vulnerable and they get lured in. And, we see it at the basic level where kids are extorted online, where they're threatened to send pictures of themselves. We see that second level where kids are meeting people in the community and they're assaulted. And then we see that third level where kids are meeting people in the community and they're traffickers and they end up being pulled into human trafficking. So, scary world.
It is a scary world. And you talk about socialization, but that socialization is happening in such isolation.
Absolutely. It is. It is.
And they're so isolated, playing those video games or behind the screen and having these relationships that are just, they're not real. They're not real life relationships. So, we talk about our population of kids at DCF and the foster parents. Is there a curriculum or any kind of training that our foster families receive about human trafficking? So
I'm glad you asked that. We have 13 curricula in our state, and if any group needs a training, please email DCF Heart at ct.gov. We train foster parents. We have a 2-hour training that we provide to foster parents, and we also have a 3-day curricula for foster parents that want to deliberately work with these kids. And when we have those trained parents, they do amazing work. Schools are supposed to be trained. Every teacher in a school is supposed to be trained. If your school has not started that training, remind them. It's legislatively mandated. Police are being trained, emergency departments, judges. All right, so through the Trafficking in Persons Council in Connecticut, there's a lot of mandated training, and we will provide it for free. So, you know, if you have and we have youth curricula as well, and those curricula are free as well. So we do Girl Scout troops and church groups and youth groups, and a number of curricula we have, some that were developed by the department and some that were developed by outside agencies that have done a wonderful job. So lots and lots of resources. So go to DCF Heart and, you know, look up some things. You'll find out how you can contact me as well if you have any questions.
And what age do you recommend that a school system would reach out to have a training occur in their school?
Schools are, every person in a school that has contact with a kid, no matter what grade it is, they're required to be trained within 6 months or higher, and then every 3 years. So there's no like, you know, high schools teachers only.
Right.
It's every age. Now, for some of the curricula we're talking about, for the trafficking curricula, it's for kids ages 12 and up. So we don't have trafficking education for kids under, but we do internet safety trainings. And in fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office has been partnering with us, and they're going to be running some internet safety trainings for kids, including some younger kids and parents in the near future. So we will post those on the website as soon as they're ready. I'm guessing we'll start to see those probably in March.
That's great. Do you find that you're getting a big response from the school systems throughout the state?
So, you know, it ebbs and flows, but the State Department of Education did a reminder recently, and we've been inundated with requests, which is awesome, right? So, and we have schools like Hartford School System. They've been amazing for the last several years. Every one of their teachers have been trained. So we do have schools that have really stepped it up. We have some schools that are now super active, and it's exciting. And then we still have some that we need to get out there too, that we're hoping that they take us up on our offer.
And I think a segment like what we're doing right now on this topic is eye-opening, because many people may think that that doesn't happen in my community, or my child isn't exposed to that, or my child may know better.
Right.
And I think that, you know, all of us, me included, you know, you're vulnerable to having your child be victimized, and that awareness and that education is so important. And on that topic, can we talk about prevention work? What type of prevention work are we doing in Connecticut?
So we are running all of those curricula for kids, right? So we're out there, we're educating children, which is super, super important. We're educating parents on internet safety. We're educating kids on internet safety. So those are some of the key things that we're doing. It's getting to those kids, right? Getting them those trainings. And sometimes that's the hard part, but that comes with awareness, right? When parents see that this is happening, they're the ones that are going to say, hey, we want our kid educated. Schools have said, no, you can't come in here because parents aren't going to want it. I will tell you, when parents come to our community trainings, and we train between 7,000 and 10,000 people a year, they've gotten us into the schools saying, we want our kids educated. So it's, you know, it comes with that education, it comes with that awareness, and doing shows like this is extremely helpful because, you know, we can spread the word this way, as well as all different other types of media that we often do.
So as a recap, if someone wanted information, where would they go?
Go to DCF Heart webpage, and you could do a quick search. And fortunately, if you do a search, DCF HART, first link that pops up, you'll get to it.
Okay.
If you need training, feel free to email me at dcfheart@ct.gov.
That's great. And again, for those viewers watching, if they suspect that a child is being trafficked, they should call
DCF Careline. But I will also say, if you ever come, and we've seen this, where you see a kid and you believe they're in a dangerous situation, that they're currently being trafficked, call 911. Don't try to intervene yourself, and don't call Caroline at that point, right? We're not 911. Call police, and then later report the case to DCF Caroline.
Okay. Tammy, thank you so much for being here. We could have several segments on this topic. It's so informative, all the work that you're doing with the department and across the state. It's really making an impact in creating that awareness, and I hope that our viewers are going to learn more from this segment and be able to access our website and all of those resources and tools. So thank you again for being a part of our show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for watching Doors to Hope and Healing. Now we're going to show you a video, a very powerful video about human trafficking and the awareness signs that you can look for. Thank you for watching.
Hi, Zach. Here's another video from my special guy. I can't believe we haven't talked all day. I wish you went to my school or a little closer so we could finally meet.
Hey, kiddo. Dinner in an hour. Don't spend too long on the phone.
Okay, I know you've been waiting for this for a while, so I wanted to give you something special. Is this okay?
Who are you? Why are you doing this?
Sometimes life just happens. Don't worry. Farmington Motorsports will get you back on the road and at a fair price. From towing to tires, emissions to transmissions.
Our ASC certified techs do it all.
Farmington Motorsports is a family-run business. We're a Napa Auto Center and AAA approved. We work on all makes and models from preventative maintenance to major repairs.
And every repair is backed by our 2-year, 24,000-mile nationwide warranty.
When life happens to you, don't worry. Farmington Motorsports.